Today, a super cool behind-the-scenes look at the NYC Media Lab. It will blow your mind. Today on Future Forward.
Then NYC and 5G. Verizon is funding exploration.
And IEEE Spectrum says ultra-wideband could be the key that opens a world of lies.
I'm Alexa Scordato.
And I am Stephen Rosenbaum. Let us launch. Hey Alexa, how are you?
Hey Steve, how was week one?
Week one was awesome, mind-blowing, awesome, all kinds of cool stuff. We'll show some videos, we'll talk about it. But the headline for those of you who missed last week's show when I kind of told everyone is I am now the managing director of the New York City Media Lab, which is a consortium of New York's greatest universities, best universities, and a bunch of awesome partner companies. And it's just like a world of really cool, super cutting edge stuff.
Yeah, and the annual summit was on Thursday, and it was massive. Like there were multiple venues. It was almost too much to keep up with.
Yeah, it's funny. It was bigger than, so I was the new, in fact, it was on stage, and I said to the audience, for the next couple of weeks, you can just call me new guy. And everyone liked that. I'm officially new guy. But it was 1,000 people. It was at Brooklyn Metro Tech, so it was up and down J Street. It was in the makerspace, which has $2 million worth of equipment in it, like all kinds of, devices that can manufacture 3D objects and print and really cool maker tools. And then it was down at CUNY, which was just 2 doors down, and then it was at 370 J Street. And we'll talk about it. I'll show a little bit of video. We'll put some links up to more video. But on behalf of this podcast, I am going to get to tell you guys some really cool stuff, and that's great, right?
So exciting.
Maybe let's talk about the judging, because there were some really good winners.
So there were $25,000 in prizes awarded.
Yeah, and the winning prizes, I mean, there were 3 really, well, no, there were a lot of them, and we have on the screen for those of you who are watching the video, the Medium post in which the $25,000 worth of winners were announced. But I'll just tell you about 2 of them. So the grand prize, $5,000 overall, was reconstructing intelligent speech from the human brain, and it was a team from Columbia University. So this is pretty high-level geek stuff, but this was essentially the ability, I'm going to get in trouble if I get it wrong, but not quite to read your mind and turn it into speech, but yeah, kind of that. Like you think something and it comes out the other side as voice.
I mean, this is incredible. Like I have a good friend whose mom suffered from a stroke a few years ago, and her speech basically never fully recovered afterwards, like maybe 60%. And so when I read about this technology, I actually, my guess is one of the more practical applications of it is that when it comes, whether it's speech impediments or stroke recovery, this is the type of thing that in the absence of people being able to say what they're thinking, this technology will be able to kind of spit it out.
So
is that right?
So among other things, it would mean you no longer need to say, hey Alexa. You simply have to think, hey Alexa.
Which could take robots and avatars to a whole other level, right?
Yeah. I just think about my wife and I arguing about turning the lights on and off with Alexa. So now she'd be thinking turn them on, and I'd be thinking turn them off. But
SNL skits of the future.
Yes, exactly right. So number 2 was a team that called Maker Brace, and I'll show a little bit of video as I'm talking, but it was essentially this really good idea, which was for children that need physical braces to be able to help with mobility. They've been enormously expensive and quite custom. And what they were able to do was scan a child's arm or leg with a phone, essentially, take that scan, turn it into data, send it to a 3D printer, print out a custom brace for the child, and have that child have immediately better mobility without having to go through a multi-thousand-dollar insurance-driven medical system.
Yeah, this was also one of those things that I just immediately thought will make a world of difference, especially in emerging markets or impoverished nations. Like there are countries where if you are born without a limb, you're really an outcast in society. To be able to afford low cost, affordable 3D printed appendages, and they're just there's so many different use cases.
Yeah, so it's but it was also one of those things, and I said this. I interviewed one of the team members and asked the question. I said, like, when you met some of the patients for the first time, it has to be. I wasn't even sure whether heartwarming or heartbreaking or both would be the answer, and she said, yeah, it's pretty emotional.
Hmm.
But this is what technology is supposed to do, right? I mean, this is like this, and by the way, part of what makes the NYC Media Lab so exciting for me is, I'm used to early stage startups. I've been in the early stage space for a long time, but it's even earlier than I've experienced.
It's earlier, but what's also interesting, it's less of the sort of hashtag first world problems kind of tech. At least that was my impression when it came to the roundup. Like, it's it's not like, oh, a new Snapchat filter or a way to like make your already easy life easier. I found a lot of the demos to be again in sectors where, yeah, there's so much room for innovation and the impact of it massive.
Yeah. All right. You know what? Let me just show you like 30 seconds of this robot that I really liked.
Pet Me Robot is an emotional robot designed for loneliness. And petting head is a gesture that's really common in Asian countries. We use this gesture to show our concern to our close friend.
So this is a young woman. She was really honest. She said, I moved to New York and I was really lonely as a first year student in New York. And I had never heard this, but she said in Asia, one of the things we do for comfort is we pat people on the head. And she said she said she didn't have anyone to pat her on the head, and she didn't want a strange boy or man to pat her on the head. So she built a robot.
Sure, everyone can try it. Sorry. Sorry, it has different mode. Yeah, different size. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, everything is handmade, so.
That's all right.
I'm really a good handy crafter. Like that, yes. You need to press in the center of it can give you a small vibration, just like it's a haptic feedback.
I'm not gonna lie, I really like it.
It's kind of like a small animal on your shoulder.
And she called it a comfort robot. And I thought it was kind of charming and a little silly, and then somebody kind of goaded me to try it on, and so I put the comfort robot on my head and patted the little fuzzy shoulder pad, and I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty comforting. It was pretty comforting. It was I think
Did you feel like a dog a little bit? Kind of like did you ever think that you wanted to be patted on the head before?
It had never crossed my mind, and maybe some of it's cultural. I'm not sure, but all I can say is now having been patted on the head by a robot, I would. I mean, think about when you're remote, when when you're traveling long distance for a long time and your loved one isn't there. I think a comfort robot is a very good thing, and
I think the concept in general. I think it's just it was the patting on the head that threw me a little bit. When I first moved to Boston many years ago, I realized that I went months without physical touch. Like I hadn't hugged anyone or I hadn't shaken a hand, and it was depressing.
Yeah, no, and Japan also has an aging population. Anyway, so and I loved her. I loved the invention. I think it's commercial. I don't know if she's going to be the one to commercialize it. All right. So the next one, then, as I wandered the floor of the demo expo after the morning panels, there was a guy holding an umbrella. I was like, okay, that's weird. It's a guy holding an umbrella. I should go over and see what the guy holding the umbrella is doing. So here's a little clip from Floating in the Sky, a VR experience.
So this is Floating in the Sky. This is a VR experience that allows you to navigate in the VR world using a physical umbrella. So this idea has actually come from my dream. I'm under pressure during my semester. So one day I dreamed that I fly into the sky and escape from all the business and the busy city. So I want to make an experience that I can fly to my wonderland. But in the process, I can know that the world is still beautiful, and I can notice a lot of interesting things beside of me.
So, honestly, I guess I thought that all VR would feel the same, but after
definitely not.
After he held,
so different.
I held the umbrella in my hand, and I tipped it left and right, and there was wind. It was very Mary Poppins-esque, but the umbrella as a driver of a VR experience was quite ethereal and really lovely.
Props can make all the difference, I've found, with the limited VR I've experienced.
But both of these students were building products. I mean, one of the things that he said was that he wanted something less stressful. And
interesting. But less stressful in what way?
He said school was really stressful. He was working, and he wanted a VR experience where he could just float above the clouds and be in a dream state. And he built him. And so both of them, both in the case of the comfort robot and the umbrella floating, were students dealing with student level issues that were real in theirs, and they were being honest about that, and then they were building solutions to solve it, which I really liked.
Very cool.
So. I'm not sure how much more I can tell you about the day. There was a panel about the future of media in 2030 that was incredibly complicated and raised some serious problems, which there will be a whole video of these, and I'll put it out. But what I came away with, and maybe this is the thesis of what I'm going to do at the NYC Maker Lab, or Media Lab, is New York is so extraordinarily diverse. It's such a collection of voices and faces and languages and religions and beliefs and ideologies that it is, in some ways, I think, the ideal place to bring together teams of students to invent the future.
I love that.
So here's a trivia question. Do you know how many languages are spoken in New York?
I don't know. 500.
Not only are you not close, 800.
Wow. 800
languages in this city, in this fabulous, crazy, wonderful, lovely city. So that's, that for me was the thing that I took away.
So do you think that was there a sense that is there talk of competing with Silicon Valley? Does New York have a competitive edge because of this diversity?
I think we're past that conversation. I think that conversation, I think at this point New York is New York and Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley, and their differences are really clear.
So this is really just about leveraging the student ecosystem, New York for what it is and always has been, and ushering in all of this new tech.
Yes, but not just new tech, new ideas, new questions, new solutions, new interfaces. Oh, which brings us almost perfectly to chapter 2 and Verizon. So
it's here. 5G.
So a year ago, Verizon put out the call for programs to support. This is an article from the Columbia University Center for Science and Society. And they were looking, it was the 5G EdTech Challenge, and the Media Lab was a partner in that. And there were 10 winners. They were each awarded $100,000. And the idea was simply to put in the hands of these PhD level students and extraordinary faculty this question of how to use 5G to make important change at the ground level. And this was at a time when Verizon was just rolling out early 5G. It was in their labs. It was in a couple of kind of hot spots. But the result was extraordinary. And I think in some ways it's exactly the kind of public-private partnership that can really make a difference, because the students were able to get their hands on the technology sooner. As a result, they were able to innovate sooner, and Verizon was able to think a whole set of new thoughts about how 5G can fit into the city. And so, yes, the fact that it is now officially here is very exciting, with the one caveat being I am unhappy with the fact that my iPhone is not 5G.
5G.
And I don't know, we haven't really talked about that, but why Apple, because clearly they made a decision at some point, and let's assume it wasn't that long ago, to not turn it on.
Yeah, I mean they did a bunch of other things, which we'll talk about later in the podcast.
Yes, indeed we will. Indeed we will. All right. So just looking at this as an outsider, like does this business raises its hand and says to the academic community, "Hey, we want new thinking on this"? How does that feel to you as an early stage entrepreneur, founder, startup person?
I mean, I think it's smart, right? You have a lot of fresh perspective, bright-eyed young people who can do a lot. They're not necessarily jaded by their previous startups, or they're not as easily influenced by networks and the latest, greatest VC headlines and TechCrunch and Hacker News, what have you. So, I mean, it makes sense. But I'm curious how much hand-holding there was. I'm curious how much of a corporate agenda might have been injected into the different briefs. So.
Yeah, it's a fair question, and even though I've got my day job, I'm not gonna necessarily pimp our partners on the podcast. That being said, though, from what I know, and I wasn't there during the year in which before the projects were completed, my sense is it was that you're dealing with a professor and you're dealing with PhD students. They're not particularly interested in, they're not. $100,000 is lovely, but it's not enough for them to bend over backwards to build overtly commercial things for Verizon. That's not what, really what they're doing is studying.
Right.
I mean, they're really like their excitement, the student excitement, the professor's excitement, the faculty excitement is innovation, being early on innovation.
Right. And I think you're going to have to see lots of companies sort of sponsor more innovation challenges with universities, because they don't have the brain power or really the ability to prioritize those initiatives in-house.
At some point, I will have more information, and I know we're going to do more with Verizon, so I will share that. But for now, we need to go to Chapter 3. And Chapter 3 is this puzzling article that IEEE wrote about this ultra-wideband thing, which, before the pod today, I said to Alexa, I don't know what this is, do you? And we both read the article and we're like, you know what? We're just going to ask Glenn. And with that, we bring on Glenn Zorpet. All right, we are back now with Glenn. Glenn, when things are puzzling and I don't get them, Alexa and I just go, let's just ask Glenn that. So when I read the IEEE Spectrum Where's My Stuff article, I had this naive kind of response, which isn't that just those little tag things that they sell for $39 that run out of battery? But the answer, of course, is it's
tile.
Much, right? Tile, isn't it just tile?
It's I think tile uses Bluetooth, but I'm not sure. But
no, it is Bluetooth.
Yeah, no, this is a whole different kettle of fish. This is a different, it uses very different frequencies. First of all, there's, it uses a set of bandwidths that are referred to as ultra-wideband, or UWB. It's in the 6 to 9 gigahertz range, and 6 to 9 gigahertz may not sound like a lot, but it's a lot. So gigahertz means billion hertz. So 6 to 9 gigahertz is from 6 billion to 9 billion hertz. So we're talking about a bandwidth in the, of roughly 3 billion hertz.
So that's a lot of hertz.
Hence the name ultra-wideband. So because of you have that much bandwidth, and because of where the bandwidth is in the spectrum, you can do things with this chunk of radio frequencies that you can't do with other ones, including other similar forms. We mentioned Bluetooth. Another one is Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi and Bluetooth are short-range, low-power radio communication schemes, and they're standards. They're for example, Wi-Fi. These are standards that are promulgated by the IEEE, my beloved employer, and ultra-wideband too is an IEEE standard. So what do we have here? Why do we care about this? Ultra-wideband was actually promulgated almost 20 years ago, and it found some use in industrial settings. And now it is being kind of dusted off for an expanded range of uses. So there's a group of companies, including Samsung, NXP, Bosch, and ASSA ABLOY, which have gotten together and formed a consortium called the FIRA Consortium. And FIRA stands for Fine Ranging. And so that's a first hint at what ultra-wideband can do that Wi-Fi and Bluetooth can't do. It can very finely range and spot a location to within centimeters, which is obviously pretty terrific if you're navigating around indoors. A lot of us are used to using GPS all the time now. GPS has varying degrees of sensitivity, but many of us have had the experience of driving on the highway and realizing that Bluetooth kind of doesn't know where we are. It thinks we're maybe as many as 10 or 20 meters away from where we actually are.
I just want to say I've been screwed by GPS so many times in the last 2 weeks, where it's like, hey, there's a bus coming, but it's really not, but you're in the wrong place. But no, actually, you're in the right place. It's really kind of terrible when it's...
So, to be fair, if you have 4 satellites that are looking at you with Bluetooth and locked onto your receiver, it's pretty darn good. But you don't always get that. And still, it's not really meant for reliable centimeter type location. But ultra-wideband can do that. So among the other things that people are looking at ultra-wideband for, and this FIRA consortium, is very precise indoor location. So where could you use that? Well, for example, in a mall. Some of us have had the experience of getting lost in one of these mega malls. And there are other things. There are indoor arenas and things that are big enough for people to get lost in, but you can't use GPS or other things in there because the signal is blocked and it wouldn't really work. It's not active enough anyway. So what's really interesting about all this, though, is, and this has not really gotten as much attention as it should have gotten, is that the latest Apple iPhone, the iPhone 11, which was announced about a month or 2 months ago, has an ultra-wideband chip in it. So Apple, this was the coolest thing about the iPhone 11, and, from a lot of the coverage, you'd never know it. Apple put an ultra-wideband chip in the iPhone 11. Now, this is amazing for a couple reasons. First of all, the ultra-wideband chip that Apple put in there, and I'm not sure who made it, might have been NXP. NXP is big in this area, but don't hold me to that. These cost about $20, even in large quantities right now, because ultra-wideband, as I say, it never really took off outside of industrial applications, so you don't have consumer-type economies of scale yet that would lower a chip down to like under $1 or even under 50 cents. So it's a $20 chip. Apple can afford to put that in a premium phone like the iPhone 11 because, you're paying $1,000 or $1,100 or $100 or whatever it is for that phone. So they can hide a $20 chip in there. But Apple has said that this is going to be key to some amazing things that they're going to introduce in the near future, which aren't there yet, but the chip's in there, the software is probably being written or finalized, and the apps are going to be coming out. So
wait.
What might these be?
So Glenn,
I know you three want to ask.
Alexa wants to know, what would these ultra-wideband applications on my phone, which I have in my hand, and will I have them by Christmas?
I don't think by Christmas, but so here's the amazing thing with ultra wideband and some of the stuff these FIRA people are talking about. One of the things is access control. So you know there's this dream that we've had for a long time where you get rid of keys, right? And you use either your smartphone, or some people are already using an implanted chip in their hand right here to unlock their car, their home, and get their office to gain access. So it's very interesting because one of the people in this FIRA consortium is ASSA ABLOY. ASSA ABLOY is, they're this enormous, they call themselves an access control company. We used to call it a lock company, but ASSA ABLOY has gone way beyond locks. It's a very high-tech company. I know they have an enormous installation in New Haven, Connecticut, but it's very clear that when you see that a company like ASSA ABLOY is involved with this technology, you've never heard of ASSA ABLOY, have you? Okay.
I was just trying to find a way to say something funny about the name without getting in trouble, and realized there was no way.
I know, we're also going to have to do a totally separate episode on the chip in your hand thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But ASSA ABLOY is an enormous company. I happen to know about it because my cousin's husband works there. But I even before that, I knew that they were big and growing bigger. They were a European-based lock and access firm that took over many of the largest lock makers in North America, and now they are taking locks and access control to the next level.
So wait, hold on. But before we get too far off the point, ultra wideband is about distance, right? It's about being able to see if I lose my dog, I can find my dog 5 miles away now.
The way to think about ultra wideband and the current uses is that it's sort of a combination between radar and short-range data communications. So you can combine these two things into one app now. So for example, for access control, you have short-range, low-power, but highly secure and highly interference-resistant data communications. So you could very securely transmit codes, access codes, or keys, if you will, that would unlock something. That could unlock something. At the same time, At the same time, you have these radar-like capabilities, so the system knows you're physically there. So it actually knows that there's someone here. So this combination of knowing where something is to a very precise degree, and also being able to securely transmit large amounts of data securely and quickly, is going to lead to a lot of interesting applications, for example, in access control, but also location. So, Internet of Things and other things.
So we're going to run out of time. Here's the button I want to put on this. When I bought my iPhone 11, I did it specifically because I knew it had an ultra wideband chip in it. Okay, that's complete. That's complete.
You were an early adopter.
No, it's complete fiction. I just made that up.
Not for the 3 cameras, Steve?
No.
For the
for the chip, for the $20 chip. But the thing that I find interesting is knowing that there's a new phone every 12 months. When I said Christmas, I'm like back timing. Like they gotta get, if they're saying something is gonna drive that phone for the $20 they put in it, they gotta have at least 6 months worth of ramp before it goes away. So maybe it's springtime.
I think Apple may see this ultra wideband chip as the center of a future strategy that involves access control. So I don't know for sure. I'm not an expert in this, but one could envision, Apple compatible locks and other access control systems where you just basically use your smartphone to access your apartment, maybe your automobile, and other things. Of course, this would involve agreements with car companies and others, but locks are the sort of thing where they just need agreements with lock companies. But imagine your smartphone as being the central device that gives you access to certain things, physical access to certain things, important things in your life that you use every day.
All right.
This is the kind of thing that you could get with ultra wideband.
So we're going to stop here, but everybody, listeners, ultra wideband, you heard it here first. Glenn, that was incredibly helpful. And I'm going to actually do a little Google News alert for ultra wideband, just so that when it finally does make its way into the world, I will know what it is.
Happy to help.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
See you, Glenn.
All right, Alexa. So, all right, now that Glenn's off, now we can gossip behind his back. Like, what do you think? Like, what if Apple's? I keep thinking that it might be tied to AR in some way.
AR, Internet of Things. I mean, as a marketer, I get excited by some of these technologies because I can think the future of retail, like just the ability to kind of like what Amazon's doing in Midtown, like you can just buy things and check out yourself. Or maybe if you're designing a conference, you can have VIPs where their device is sort of giving them clearance to access certain rooms. I mean, there are a bunch of different applications for this. I just wonder how far we are from making those things a reality.
Well, the good news is we just got a bunch closer. Over the next couple of weeks, I'll pull out some other things from the summit and I'll share them. But for now, we are out of time. So remember, like us, share us, vote for us on iTunes. We need your help. It's very important. Share with your friends. And with that, Alexa, we are out of time.
See you next week.
See you next week. Bye-bye.